Thunderstorm Generator, is based on that very fundamental principle. If there's have a 0 point, then they can communicate that energy anywhere in the universe. There's another fundamental thing about how energy interacts with matter and with the ether.
That's pretty impressive. I hope our viewers as well are enjoying the discussion as we do.
Plasmoids are the most powerful entities in the universe. And the last real plasmoid generator I could point you to really was Solomon's Molten Sea. And that was the charger. We're going into mass production now.
Thanks a lot for the book announcement and a lot of things that are being said in the first time.
We'll take you through the generation of the plasmoids happens in this water here. Between this and this sphere, they get charged. There's a 0 point here. So that is amazing. And it means that what it proves is the engine itself, because this point is just the exhaust coming before it's gone into the sphere.
Mr. Malcolm, thank you very much for agreeing to this interview. We are happy to welcome you, and I hope our viewers, they are as well as excited as we are. So after the release of the documentary, FFG, A New Era of Free Energy, the Thunderstorm Generator technology that you presented at the Congress in Zurich, it actually rose great interest among our viewers, and that was the reason why we're doing this interview. We received lots of questions from both amateur and professionals, and they are interested in learning the physical principles of the Thunderstorm generators. And today I propose to delve into the topic of plasmoid energy generation and reveal it from the practical side, if you don't mind. So we've prepared some questions. So the first one is, in your videos, you talk about how plasma has a natural ability to organize itself into plasmoids. Can you explain why and how this happens, please?
Yeah, well, thanks for this opportunity, because it is very timely. You might have noticed that now the establishment's come out and admitted cold fusion's real. So it's an auspicious week. And in the same week, we just set up for the rolling out of the technology. We've restructured from fundamentally a business structure that was research and development, and which meant that I spent 7 years on an island writing these notes, and this is part of the notes. Some of them are redacted. But the front cover there shows the plasmoid unification model, which is actually the holy grail sort of science, where it unifies all things. And recently, Sheila Raymond, who's a sound technician expert, she actually took these numbers that are in here and put them on an oscilloscope and found they were all coherent. So all these numbers are coherent together. So it is the unification model that everyone's been looking for. And Einstein and Tesla said, wow, the man that does the unification model, and by the way, my grade 6 teacher that said, Malcolm, if you want a car that runs on water, you'll never do it unless you solve the unification model, because Tesla and Einstein didn't agree on much, but they did agree that the person that figured out all things would have the metric to tap unlimited power. And that's what I did, just as a bit of a background. And the Thunderstorm Generator is really the first low-hanging fruit. It's the simplest application of the technology, which is the plasmoids are the most powerful entities in the universe. They make up, plasma. You have the 4 states of matter, and I'd say there's 5, but anyway, let's go liquid, solid, as in ice, liquid as in water, gas as in water in its gas phase, and then you have the plasma, which is where all the constituent parts of that are freed. So basically that's plasma. The plasma, then you can reform that using frequencies and certain. The only geometry in the world that works is a collapsed sphere. So you take a sphere, collapse it North Pole to South Pole, and so then it forms this coherent structure, which creates its own electromagnetic field, and that holds protons and electrons in orbit, and neutrons. So the whole fabric of matter is all to do with plasmoids. And recently, a couple of years ago, the Kotlinski cloud was discovered, which is made up of these plasmoids. The New Science of Heaven by Robert Temple. It's a really good book for your viewers to have a look at. And also, I suppose we've now got out the new book too, which is by Roland Perry, The Shaman. And we just spoke to Roland a second ago. He's going to be writing the next book. But so that just gives you some background. And this is a very auspicious week because basically, as I said, they've come out and admitted that Martin Fleischmann cold fusion was actually that experiment was repeated by many people, but they didn't want that to come out, and they didn't want the recognition of plasmoids, because if you go back to the Sanskrit text, that was the Vajra was an instrument to make ball lightning plasmoids, which are called Vidrit, and so and that was recognized as the most powerful weapon in the universe because the plasmoids are the most powerful entities. Everything in the universe, including actually your heart's a plasmoid generator. So your intuition, your heart and your intuition comes from those plasmoids that are generated by your heart. When your heart creates a vacuum, it increases the microbubble size, and when it pumps forward, that collapses the bubbles. So naturally in your blood, you have these plasmoids. That is your second intelligence, because that means that the plasmoids are Kotlinski cloud, which surrounds us, and it's 18 times the volume of the Earth and Moon combined. And the plasmoids they make their own homes, because they generate the carbon, and carbon really, to simplify it, in my mind, is just like three heliums. The heliums, 222, 2 protons, 2 electrons, 2 neutrons, or 3 of those is 666, 4 of those is 888 oxygen. So it's very simple. So in our machine, I simply turn the carbon into oxygen by adding a helium, which is only pushing together 2 hydrogens. And Roland Perry, who we just spoke to, who wrote the book, we're putting out another book this year. This is all a new announcement for the audience, right? This is you heard it here first. Is that the book's coming out? It's Oliphant and Rutherford, and it's about their 1934 paper, which is on the fact that you can fuse 2 hydrogens together and make a helium. So, and that's part of the whole process is that I was able to put everything on the plasmoid, including all the elements. And so the way we use in the Thunderstorm Generator is the simplest thing. We just simply take the vacuum from the engine and that actually the vacuum on one side of the water actually pushes the air through. So you're not sucking the air through, it's actually being pushed through by the difference between the weight of the atmosphere and the vacuum on the other side of the water. So it pushes that through. And so then those bubbles are going into a vacuum, the microbubbles expand. It's only the microbubbles that actually create the plasmoids, because otherwise they'll get distorted by the current. So they have to be small enough to be within the current and not being moved by it. So when they collapse into that 0 point, and that 0 point is the glue that then holds it together, because it's got its own gravity well. And the electromagnetic field's in the shape of an infinity symbol, right? But it's in there's videos and notes I said in straightfoundation.earth. You'll see that sort of model there. So basically, the formation of the plasmoids is caused by 3 things in the universe. So when you have a meteorite coming in, you have multi-axis shear, right? And you have the energy, from there, free energy, free protons, electrons, ions, right? And so and then you have the water, which is actually in the atmosphere. And so when meteorites hit, you tend to get this this ball lightning that comes from the charge separation that occurs in those environments. So basically, when we put the exhaust gas on one side, it's positive, and when we got the vacuum coming through the center, it's negative. Our thunderstorm generator, we create charge separation, and because it's having to go through its course, it's got multi-axis shear, so therefore it's the best environment to create plasma and plasmoids. So that answers question number one, I think.
Okay, thanks a lot. That's pretty impressive, and for the book announcement and a lot of things that are being said in the first time. So our viewers, please pay attention to the release. Okay, so the next one is what physical processes keep plasma in a plasmoid in the shape of a sphere or torus?
Cold fusion, which is now called the audience lattice confinement fusion, which is the same thing, but they don't want to admit it's the same thing. So, but you can look at the recent releases on that. But the process the differences between plasmoids born in water, because they have a water sheath. And that sheath is quite simple because you have a net negative. That means you've got more electrons and protons spinning. And so you have a drawdown and because of the clockwise motion, which generates negative charge, if you like, it's like its own generator. So, and it's its own self-contained electromagnetic field. But the sheath of water, like the surface tension on the water remains. So when the bubble collapses into the 0 point, it's maintained still got its surface tension. So that's really interesting, because what it does is then, because the positive gets pulled into the inside, which is the hydrogen, and then the oxygen gets put to the outside. And that's a very good, I do have a good, and I should probably refer to this because it's something that's almost impossible to describe. So I should try and get pictures so that people can see it. So here's the process you have here. You have a process here where you have, if you have a positively charged plasmoid, net positive, because of course everything's always, if you have, for every force there's an equal and opposite force. So in our thunderstorm generator, it's based on that very fundamental principle. Number one is what people don't know, and they should know, is that when you put petrol in your car, if you put $100 worth of petrol, $33 goes to drive the car, and $66 is wasted. Now, that $66, I'm using that and just recovering half of it, which is if you recovered half of that, that'll be the full power of the motor. You just half your waste heat. So this is a waste energy recovery system, waste heat recovery system. So the waste heat's turned to plasmoids in the thunderstorm generator by the multi-axis shear, by the charge separation. They're charged up. Now on the outside, you've got the positive plasmoids coming out after having been spent in the combustion chamber. Before they go to the combustion chamber, the negative charge puts all the hydrogen to the center, because it's pulling the hydrogen in, and puts all the oxygen, and that's a sort of a visualization of it. That's the positive sitting in the center, and there's the negative sitting in the center. It's actually quite interesting because it's a geometric, if you like, sacred geometry force multiplier. Simply because you're putting, in the case of a net negative, it increases the net negative because you're putting all the oxygen to the outside, which is negative, and putting all the hydrogen to the inside, which is positive. And the opposite happens here, where if you have a net positive, it pulls in the oxygen and puts the hydrogen to the outside. So now you've got millions of times multiplication in the potential difference, simply through geometry.
Wow.
And this is what wasn't understood. And Randall Carlson has been doing a lot of sacred geometry, and this is what this is about. The geometry is what becomes the force multiplier. But anyway, so that's the fundamental theory that was that I went through to put together the whole of the this unification model here, the plasmoid unification model, and you can refer to that. There's posters that are available as well on that. So, and then we also have here, we have the abstract, which talks about what time is, because the whole point is that it's about frequency, and our whole technology works on frequency. So basically, because time is the product of a mirror image of numbers, and so I figured that out. And having figured that out, it meant that I was able to calculate out a new view of maths and physics and chemistry. And so this book redefines all the things we thought we knew about maths and chemistry and physics, because basically our current maths is only about 80% of the real maths. So 20% of the real maths. So it's 80% we don't know. And this brings back the 80% we didn't know. And basically one of the main things is that time itself is a product of equal and opposite numbers. So 8 times 9 times 10 is 720, 10 times 9 times 8 is 720, 720 by 720 is 518,400, which is 518,400. That's the amount of seconds of 6 days of creation. The moon travels 51,840 miles in 24 hours. The angle of the Cheops pyramid is 51.84 degrees, which means it makes the King's chamber 25.92 degrees, which is the melting point of hydrogen. So, you know, and the inside the King's chamber, you've got the so-called sarcophagus or whatever, but that's actually where the Ark of the Covenant was. And that's 2.5 cubits by 1.5 cubits by 1.5 cubits, which means that the Ark of the Covenant is actually 5.625 square cubits. Multiply that by 64 and it's 360 degrees. So it's all works together. And also going back to the moon, which is our timekeeper, travels its own diameter, 2,160 miles in an hour. So in 12 hours, it's traveled 25,920 miles, which is the 25,920 years of the zodiac, right? That's each zodiac sign is 2,160 years, the same as the 2,160 years of the diameter of the moon. And the distance between the moon and the Earth, average, is 108 times the diameter of the moon. The distance between on average between the sun and the Earth is 108 times the diameter of the sun. So all these things are intelligent design. They're all perfect. They are all resonant. And that's what their plasmoid unification model shows, that all things are resonant. And now it's proven beyond any doubt, because Sheila Raymond did the oscilloscope work that showed that all these numbers are coherent. So they form a one form. So going back to the what I did with this is that, and if you take 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5 times 6 is 720, and 1 times 2 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 2 2 times 1 720. So again, 720 by 720 is your 518,400. So, and in this too, the 2592 number that I mentioned, which is the distance the moon travels in 12 hours, and the 25.92 the angle in the King's chamber. You put those together and mirror image them and multiply them to 129,600, which is a resonant frequency energy unit for all things that we discovered. And when Sheila had spent 12 years looking for a 6-petal flower on the oscilloscope, and she put that in, she found her 6-petal flower,
wow.
which was a whole life's work. So the point is that all these things were well known but aren't known now.
The symphony of the universe.
Yes, and even the sun's diameter, if you take that number and like 864 and 468, the mirror image, you get 36,864. So all the numbers are perfect and they all work in perfect harmony together. So, and that's so the secret of cold fusion, and which is now called lattice-based fusion, and the secret of the whole universe is that everything is resonating at set frequencies, and therefore, and if you think about it, that can be the only way it is. Because if anything wasn't resonant, it'd be destroyed. Like noise cancellation on a truck, you play the same sound but opposite. Yep. So you flatten out the whole sound. So basically, that's in the overall picture. With what we've put into the which is in the notes, and what we've put into the technology is that the Thunderstorm Generator, along with the bubbler, is simply a mechanism to create plasmoids and charge them.
Okay, that sounds good. Already touched a bit the numbers and the pyramids as well, you mentioned, and an angle of 51.84, the same as the angle of the inclination of the base of the Khufu pyramid, is optimal for preventing turbulence when moving from a sphere to a cylinder. Can you explain why this is so?
Because the 51.84, the same way that time and space, like 2,160 miles the moon travels in an hour, so in 12 hours travel that, the same principle. It's the interchange. See, this diagram shows that they're all related. So if it's 51.84 degrees, that's the angle at which energy moves, time moves. So if you have the angle of time, then it's the perfect angle to translate from one energy shape or source into another. It's the funnel at 51.84 degrees is actually the optimum angle for energy to move, to take it from, to get a laminar flow from a sphere into a cylinder. That's the optimum angle. The angle of Cheops pyramid is 51.84 degrees. Because why? Because that's the optimum angle that energy moves at. So it's an energy producing device, the pyramid, right?
Okay.
So it's at 51.84. Why? It's the angle at which energy moves. So, and if you change that angle, you're fighting. If it's less, you're fighting. If it's more, you're fighting. If it's there, it's a perfect translation of ether to matter, or energy into whatever form it's in, into another form, or into a different frequency. It's a translate. Yeah.
Again, so many years have passed since these structures have been built, but again, the precision amazes. 51.84.
They left the melting point of hydrogen there for us to see. 20 in the King's Chamber, 25.92 degrees. They left the angle of time, because who knew? One year is 518,400 seconds. The 6 days of creation, then the 311040 Brahma all time. It's all the same numbers.
We, I think, partially touched this, but if we something did not cover, what conditions are necessary for plasmoids to generate energy? If you can share about.
If you read the Sanskrit text, it's very interesting, because what's been hidden from us is that, and this is what came out of the Tibetan teaching and the training, is force multiplication. So how can you multiply force? So, and then if your heart's a plasmoid generator, and the plasmoids are the most conscious and 99% of the universe, so we're a hydrocarbon-based organism, and that they like to live in carbon tubules, which are black diamond, and that's what they create. So when you take a plasmoid, right, going back to the actual how it holds together and how it gets energy, because it's a self-contained electromagnetic field, because it has a 0 point, which means it's tapping the ether. The concept is that it comes from having a still center. And that is, with that still center, you can, there is no time space. And there's all the energy there is 10 to the 36, which is my claim in this model. And that's what I put it here as being the outside. This is ionizing here, non-ionizing the blue, and ionizing the red. So there's another fundamental thing about how energy interacts with matter. So, and with the ether. So as said, as far as elements are concerned, time is the mold in which matter is formed. That is, time is frequency. So, and if time's a mirror image of itself, which I explained, and all time, another thing with it, going back to my Tibetan teaching, the Brahma all time is 311 trillion and 40 billion for one rotation of our galaxy. But if you're taking the actual 518,400 seconds to 6 days of creation, multiply that by 60, you get the same number, 31104. So in two different cultures that think they're different, they're not. It's just a lack of knowledge. So then I realized, well, okay, so that's the same number as that. And therefore, when you've got the forced multiplication, you're talking about the plasmoids are all linked to each other, right? Because through that 0 point, there is no time-space. It's a very hard concept for people to get their head around because we live in a time-space reality, we think, right? But in actual fact, if there isn't any time-space, then like my parable, it's the eye of the hurricane, where all information is available. But if you think of life as being on the edges of the hurricane, where you're getting blown away and all life's trials are on the outside, but if you can make it to the center, it's still, and there's perfect knowledge and perfect peace and perfect truth. And also present the fact, okay, if this is proven to be real with the oscilloscope, but I've translated that into a machine that goes onto engines, which makes them pollution-free. And that's now been, and this is a thing that's happened this year, that's been validated independently by independent analysis. And the fact is that we have proven that the carbon is being turned into oxygen in the Thunderstorm Generator at pressures and temperatures literally that no one thought was possible. And that's why, but now everyone's accepted it, and that's why. And it was lattice confinement fusion, because what I did was we annealed those stainless steel spheres. So as if they had, like when you stamp them or spin them to make the sphere, the stainless steel, then you're bending all the crystal structure. And it's only a perfect crystal structure that has a centered charge. And that's where the plasmoids sit. So that's why we anneal the stainless steel before we punch it. After we punch it and after it's been welded together, we anneal it again. So that's the most perfect presentation for the plasmoids to create a home for them to work. It's the same as the Vajra, because basically the Vajra is a tool that actually creates the best conditions for the plasmoids to form. Mm-hmm. Right, and so with the energy we're talking about, if you think about it, the plasmoids in the sun, if have a 0 point, then they can communicate that energy to any plasmoid anywhere in the universe, because there is no time-space.
It's sort of, obviously, dear viewers, I'm not a scientist, but as a human being, I was trying to get as much information about what we're discussing about, and it sort of reminds me about how you call it, like interconnected particles.
Yes, you're talking
regardless
about
of
quantum entanglement.
Yeah.
And quantum entanglement is simply the concept, and I proved this as well, because I was working with William Sam Conley, who worked for a government agency, and we did an experiment with the plasmoids, because they sort of, there's a time-space thing, right? So you say there's 0 point, there is no time-space, but as this model shows, there are coordinates that come from that. Because if you're in the 0 point, that's one thing, but you're always then connected. There's coordinates around you, because from that 0 point, then it goes out. So if you're saying the other center of the hurricane to the end of the arm of the hurricane is 1,000 miles or 500 miles. You're always, and in a direction, like it's spinning around, and so there's always a relationship in time space. But I think also there's another thing about knowing and knowing what the basis of it was the basis of it was plasmoid consciousness, which is heart consciousness, which is your intuition, but it's also follow your heart. And I'm working with the Indian government on this, and on the development of plasmoid. We just got results back from them this week. They had a full injected engine, and they came back with I think 0.15% oxygen before they turned the technology, and then 20.45% oxygen after. So atmospheric levels after, and the pollution went down from like the carbon dioxide from 12% down to I think 0.3%, and the carbon monoxide went down from around about, I think, 6% down to 0.25%. Yeah. So these results are coming in now, real time. So the reality is it works, right? The technology works, and it's old, and we lost it. And the last real plasmoid generator I could point you to really was Solomon's Molten Sea, which was in the original temple 3,000 years ago. And that was the charger, if you like, the battery charger for the Ark of the Covenant. So, and as I mentioned before, the Ark of the Covenant fits into this as well, because actually those dimensions are all to do with the 360 degrees here. And the numbers all plot out on this, coherently. So the thing is that you can charge up the plasmoids in our Thunderstorm Generator after they've been generated in the bubbler, and you can discharge them by applying just a positive charge to them, and it discharges that energy that you've recovered from your waste heat stream. Yep. So that is the mystery of the plasmoids. So you can tap unlimited energy, 10 to the 36, which is an incomprehensible amount of energy for us. You can tap that out of those sacred geometry forms, and that's where I believe it's been an insidious process where trying to say that all our teachings from ancient times have been wrong, or have been incomplete, or they were primitive. No, because if you have plasmoids, like King Solomon used the plasmoids to cut the blocks for the temple, used the plasmoids to engrave the diamonds, right? Because he had a conscious reaction with them, interaction, right? Plasmoids are consciousness, and plasmoids are life. They're basically the homeostatic mechanism for the planet. So they control the size of the planet, the size of the moon. The distances. They're basically the guardians of the galaxy, the real guardians of the galaxy, because they make sure that all those things are working correctly, because they are, the creation center. They're the still center, right? That everything, the matter comes from. So if you look at permanence at rest, is the eye of the storm. But that the coherence and the perfect center creates a perfect storm. When the center of a hurricane collapses, the whole storm collapses. But it's interesting how the simplest thing, which goes back to the plasmoids, they're the foundation of all life. And the disgraceful thing from the human race point of view, and the very sad thing, is that we lost their name, that they even existed, and we lost the relationship with them. Because I think as we became more confined in cities and we lost our connection to nature, then the only way I got it back was to isolate myself, which my Tibetan teacher said, Malcolm, the good news is you're going to isolate yourself and you'll download all this information. The bad news is when you go into the world, you're going to be so disappointed you're just going to head back to the island. So basically, I'm halfway back to my island now.
The good news is that you're not alone. The fact is, thanks God that we are meeting here already.
It's quite an auspicious timing. When I finished the first cold fusion device, I knew I had to write these notes. And so basically it was about 9 years ago I started writing these notes, because when I ran the cold fusion device, I didn't understand those questions. I wouldn't be able to answer the questions that we're answering now. But just to say that was when I determined that the Earth, no one in the world understood, about cold fusion and what it really was. So, and it was about the interaction with the ether with matter. So that the sun is a time imprinting device. It simply prints time onto the ether, and that creates matter. And so if you have plasma, and you have any frequency that you apply to the plasma, you can create any element you want.
Okay, we are going now
That's
a
another
bit
one.
into an alchemy as well.
Yes, yeah. Well, it is. And I think the thing is that when you know the truth of how the elements put together, there's another reality you have to then face, is that it's an intelligent design. Like, it's not like random. The thing is that the soul, everything has a blueprint, which is your blueprint from the ether. So you take an ether blueprint, which is a soul, the body grows within that, from the frequency distribution that's in that. So the body grows inside that. And then, so obviously the soul within which the body grows survives. So that blueprint still exists. So and that is, still moves on. And so we have in this lifetime an opportunity for that to learn and to, to do, I think one of the things that I was fortunate, I had very good mentors. Even Guy Obolinski was arguably the top scientist in the US, and one of the top in the world. And now I'm working with Robert Haralick in New Mexico, and he's one of the top scientists, I'd say, in the world. And we're writing a book on all of this to translate it from this, which no one understands at the moment, back into language, conventional language. Because everyone has advised, like Moray King, who wrote a lot of books on the cold fusion and stuff. Moray, when he introduced me at the Tesla Tech Conference in New Mexico, Albuquerque, New Mexico, said, Malcolm's notes are like, it'll be 10 or 20 years before we even understand a tenth of what's in the notes. But he said, but there's enough in this, and the fact that the cold fusion device is working, which is the Thunderstorm Generator. And then I have a direct matter to energy device, which is the next generation, which will be for space travel. It's a warp drive, if you like. And that's actually, I'll show you this, while I can. So this is the direct matter to energy drive here. This is the, so this actually is a mechanism by which you use the plasmoids as a drive, yeah. And basically, these are the turbines that I built and the test work that I did. And these are in my notes. You've got a mechanism by which, in my notes, that these is driven, and so the sequence in which it's driven. I'll find that here. Yeah, is this was the picture of the direct matter to energy drive.
Okay, going deeper into the physics, how does the effect of electromagnetic waves on plasma depend on the frequency of the wave?
So basically, if you go back to the fundamentals, so how is matter formed in our solar system, right? It comes from the sun. That's the basic. And what is the sun? It's a frequency imprinting device. And first it imprints the frequency of the hydrogen, which is your 2592 number. Why do you know that's important? Because, as I said, 2592 minus 259.2, with 0 being the melting point of water, right, gives you your great year, 25,920 years.
Okay.
Right. So therefore,
cycle.
There's the frequency of our solar system, which is the first element, hydrogen, which our society also, which is be a bit of a shock to people to know that hydrogen's a group, it's not an element. So the whole of our society, some people know, but none of the chief scientists that I've spoken to have known that protium is actually what the sun's made of. Okay. Not hydrogen. So if you go to the dictionary, you'll see that protium is what the sun's made of. Hydrogen's a group. Okay. So there I am saying, well, wait a minute, it's not. And I'm seeing in the whole of society going, hydrogen, hydrogen. I said, but wait a minute, it doesn't exist. It's not an element. So we've got a society, as I said, lost 80% of its maths and probably 80% of its language it's lost as well. Because language used to be, that's why we can't interpret the ancient Sanskrit texts, because it had images, and it had actual images, then it had the actual numbers. Each letter had a corresponding number, like Pythagoras. He was taught he was an alchemist. Now, what's alchemy? We talked about alchemy. Alchemy was simply knowledge, because Al was a student. Kemet was the old name for the Nile. So everyone for thousands of years and still now go to the Library of Alexandria, and all the Plato and Pythagoras went there, but Pythagoras wasn't his name, because what he did was make a name that added up to 864, the Dharma of the sun. When I looked at the numbers and thought, and the Greeks, each Greek letter has a corresponding 27, the same as the Hebrew. It's 1 to 9, 10 to 90, 100 to 900. And when you read it across, that's 111, 222, 333, 444, 555, 666, 777, 888, 999 is the first 9 elements, and then they repeat. So guess what? The Hebrew language says in the beginning there was the Word, right? And the Word was God, and the Word was with God, the God was God. Well, what the Hebrew language just told you, the first 9 elements. 111 hydrogen, 222 helium, 333, then 666 carbon, 777 nitrogen, 888 oxygen, right? So you've got the first in the Bible, which is like meant to be like this ancient document, they didn't know anything, in the Hebrew language at the beginning in Genesis, which Nikola Tesla quoted as well, gives you the first 9 elements.
Unexpectedly.
Yeah, the truth's the truth, yeah.
I don't know if we've answered the question, but
Just
how does the effect of electromagnetic waves on plasma
Yes, the
depend on the frequency of the waves?
So what you can do is, if you imagine that you've got any frequency creates a shape, the figures of Chaldee or whatever.
Yes.
So, and you can apply a frequency to any medium and you'll create vibration. So basically, if you provide the frequency of any element, and you can calculate the frequency in my notes, I showed how you could, using the example of protium, because protium, as again, the moon travels its own diameter, 2,160 miles in 24 hours. Sorry, in 12 hours. And so that same distance in miles is the same as each star sign is 2,160 years. So basically, there you got distance and time are shown as the same. So distance and time, and then I developed the concept of the area volume time, which is in my notes, which is here. I took all of the elements, and here was it's page 368 here, and I've got the elements here, and used the same how time was, as I told you, was equal and opposite numbers. So therefore, if time is equal and opposite numbers, then everything is equal and opposite numbers. It's how matter is constructed through frequency, which is time. Times the sun's a time imprinting device. And if you actually go to my abstract here, which you were looking at before, we do have a collapsing bubble diagram here, just showing the audience there how a bubble collapses. And then when a bubble collapses, how that collapse then creates the plasmoid, and the plasmoid charges and discharges in our technology, and that's in our notes. But going back to the original abstract in the notes here, you've actually got the number here, which I mentioned before, going back to 129,600. The resonant frequency energy unit is a product of the melting point of hydrogen mirrored. So 259.2, 2.952. So the equal and opposite numbers. So therefore, the applied frequency on ether, if you look at if you take hydrogen, and it's the alpha sequence, like Alpha Prospects is one of our companies, so we're floating next year, and Alpha Prospects, alpha ladder, right? The alpha ladder means you can go up from one element and then up to another. So you can make helium, hydrogen, 2 hydrogen fused makes helium. Then you got 2 heliums, 444. So you got hydrogen, lithium, beryllium, boron, which is a 444, and then 555's carbon, 666 carbon, 777 nitrogen, 888 oxygen, and 999 fluorine. So, and then the sequence repeats, which I just said before about the Hebrew language. It's the same with Sanskrit. So we had that knowledge tracking through our history all the way.
Now it's time for truth,
Yeah.
and that's what we are going for. And so many things, as you said, we as humanity we don't notice, we don't want to look at, and even what you mentioned about the first verses of the Bible basically tells us about word, but what in other words is word? It's a wave which has a frequency, and coming back to the topic of
and time is the
how
mold in which matter is
frequency.
formed. So the liquid, if you put it in a cup and the cup's round, it'll be round. So if you think about the crystal form, if the cup's square, then that'll be cubical form. It's carbon. If you add a few more corners to that, then it's oxygen. It's the shape of the cup that determines the shape of the water. And if the sun is a frequency imprinting device, and if you look at my notes here, I've got all of the monad, diad, triad, tetrad crystal form, that each mineral has a crystal form. Monad, triad, diad, tetrad. So basically the carbon's cubical. And if you look on my model, just to go into this quickly, you'll see that if you take here, you look at carbon, then you're going to have 6 planes. When you talk about the hours, it's like talking about hours and planes and distance, 6 planes, in to form a cube. And then you've got the angles. If you look at the angles on there in the compass at 90 degrees, 6 planes. So in my model, it shows that carbon is 6 planes at 90 degrees, 6 forming a cube. So that just gives you a simple thing about frequency. Then, because the internal angles of a cube are 2,160 degrees, and the sun cube or the sun square, like if you take the actual, this is like more profound than Einstein's formula equals mc squared, which is wrong anyway, because you have to correct that because energy equals mass, and you have to multiply that by left and right hand spin, or clockwise and anti-clockwise spin, and then you have to multiply the light, which is not a constant, that's just the speed of light at the 0 point. But if you actually add spin, then you can either accelerate or deaccelerate time. So basically, so you have to do the left over right again. So it's Einstein's formula. The most profound formula is the sun square is 3456 minus the sun's diameter, 864, which is ether. So you've got the sun square, which is matter, and ether equals 2592, 2592. How simple is that? There's no complicated maths, there are no big long formulas. It's just that what's the difference between ether and matter? 3456 sun square minus the ether, 864, what does it equal? Time. The great year, 25,920. The angle of the King's Chamber, 25.92. Angle of the Cheops Pyramid, 51.84. Amount of distance the moon travels in 12 hours, 25,920.
Okay, moving forward. I'll just leave this to our
editors,
viewers, because the amount of information they've heard during this couple of hours, I think it can give enough base for exploration for like years and years to dive deeper. What you've been saying.
It's like Moray King said, it's be 10 or 20 years before anyone understands 10% of what I've written.
So moving forward, what temperature do you think is maintained inside the plasmoid?
Literally the same pressures and temperatures of the sun.
Oh.
Yeah, because it's such a small point, that therefore you have no idea of scale. You know what I mean? How can you measure it? Because it's so tiny. Yeah. So, but the calculations on the implosion, which was actually, this is Oppenheimer and Schneider wrote a mathematical paper in 1939. All right. Which is also going to be an unpopular bit of revelation. Right? And if you read that, they calculated, because actually, remember, the atomic bomb started with implosion because it had a sphere of high explosive, right? And what did it do when it all set off at once? It imploded.
Okay.
So it was an implosive device, then that set off another reaction. It was an explosion. But the point is that what basically, if you look at cold fusion, or now it's called lattice confinement fusion, right? So that was the reason it's a safe technology, and we got on before. Probably just got off the topic, but that sheath of water that creates if you like, the skin for the plasmoid is a non-radiating boundary. So everything that happens in there, there's no escape of radiation. It's clean.
Okay.
So, and this has been the big lie that's been propagated now, is saying, oh, there's some radiation. Well, you can't measure it, but trust us, it's there. No, it's got a non-radiating boundary. It's clean, and so we have plasmoids being generated in our body, every minute, every hour. So basically the self-contained electromagnetic field, confinement field, is a confinement field. There's nothing radiates out from it. So, but if they're created in air and they don't have that, they don't have that water sheath. Now they can be created in clouds where they do have a water sheath, right? So it's not like, but if it's dry air, like in a lab or something, if they have dry air or in a vacuum, and you create them there's no sheath, there's radiation. So they're two different things altogether.
Well, the truth is hopefully unstoppable, and the more we voice the truth, the more we uncover the real reality of this world, the more difficult it is to hide in a needle in a bag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's and it goes back to the nothing new under the sun, because if you read the Vedas and you look into history just repeats itself. Yeah. So you go over the same cycles again and again.
Yeah, true. Okay, Mr. Malcolm, another interesting question. In an interview with George Lash, it was mentioned that during the operation of your setup, he recorded a temperature difference of 100 degrees Celsius over a distance of 4 inches inside the sphere. The upper part of the sphere was significantly hotter than the lower one. Can this effect be associated with the presence of plasmoids? In addition, in unhardened spheres, the weld seemed turned out to be hotter than the rest of the surface by the same 100 degrees. How would you explain this?
Well, again, it's because they have a structure, and the whole thing about dueling tornadoes is that you have a tornado going one direction, a tornado going another, and like the galaxy, you have arms, so everything structures itself that way. So you have like intervals, and those arms cross each other, and so that'll create straight lines. I mean, the best I've had was within like a few millimeters, I had a temperature with a proper thermo gauge on it. We did the temperatures with certified N-type thermocouples, and like to start off, the air coming in from the engine, when we put the N-type thermocouple there, and we just ran the engine normally 260 degrees in the exhaust flow. When we turned the technology on, it went up to 700 degrees. Right, just so that was one thing George Lash did. He did that thing. We got graphs of that, and we got a thing of that. But in the thing itself, I've seen between the pipe coming out the center, out the top, when we had the flow through, within a couple of millimeters, you had 700 and sort of 70 degrees, right, on the sphere, and the pipe coming out was 40 degrees, and they were in contact. And it was within a few millimeters. Wow. So one's black, and the other's cherry red. So you can see it. You don't have to be Einstein to see that there's, and that's what George saw when we were doing the car in the North Carolina conference. That you could see that line, really, because you're talking about geometry, and the effect is based on the sort of the. Obviously, there's a fabric, an underlying fabric of ether that everything's working off. It's like a scaffolding, if you like, and everything has to work off the scaffolding. So if you have hot points, it's because of the nature of the scaffolding, so where it is and where it isn't. And the pressures and temperatures too have a lot to do with and quite often as it's circulating, you'll see just an equator this way, because it's actually goes from like cherry red then to black, just in a line. Right? So horizontal. You have horizontal things as well as vertical, because you have these cells or these systems that actually will then have hot spots and cold spots. Nodes and dips. So the hot nodes are nodes and the dips are cold. Yeah. So that's how that works. So that's why George Lush was recently in India too, and he helped build the model that I just described earlier, where you had the fantastic results. Yeah. And George is back in London now, and so, but he's been there during the build on the big generator sets with the 24-inch spheres, and then with the builds on the smaller 432 spheres. And he's also been working with the development of the geometries and the industrial process along with our people recently on that.
Okay, thank you. Well, you've touched a bit on the engine part, but here's the question. Why does the gasoline internal combustion engine in your setup emit pure oxygen instead of harmful substances? How can this be explained? Can this process be controlled?
Yeah, well, that was the simple thing. This goes back to Oliphant. We published in the book this year, Oliphant and Rutherford. This is 90 years late. Like, come on, we're 90 years behind when it was, it could have happened. In fact, we do know it did happen 90 years ago. That's just a branch of science that we were, the human race was deprived of. The point is that the ultimate thing is that we'll all have our own energy source, so we don't get taxed. So, you don't have the fat cats up the top and everyone's starving to death down the bottom, right? Because if we had a mobile phone has a direct managed energy drive, it can drive this hotel, it can run this, it can run your car, it can run your house, you can plug it in. Everyone can hop onto a plane with their phones, plug them in, and the plane can go forever.
Interestingly.
The opposite. You actually plug your phone into the plane and the plane runs, because everyone's got their battery.
So no need to switch off the phone. Good news.
Yeah, well, you're not going to interfere with the plasmoids. If we get rid of oil and gas now, like diesel has 100 times the energy density of a battery, right? You cannot replace that, right? And the batteries are a big lie anyway, because they're all bursting into flames. And, if you actually take the energy equation, I'd be hard-pressed for anyone to convince me that they're more than 10% energy efficient. I mean, an internal combustion engine's only 33% energy efficient. A normal coal-powered station, power station, coal-fired, the coal is only 28% efficient. And maybe if you trick it up a bit, you might be able to get up to 45. I think if you trick up an internal combustion engine, with a lot of external stuff, like the big ship engines, have water injection and everything, you might be able to trick them up to 50%. But you're still 50% waste of your energy. So when you start taking that down, and the lie of the hydrogen economy, because the hydrogen economy, the only way to really produce hydrogen is by, destroying hydrocarbons, right? So there you've lost half your energy. So the whole thing is just an intellectual fraud, in my opinion.
Okay. When the generator enters the operating mode, releasing almost only oxygen, what serves as fuel for it? Due to what fuel does it work, and what is the consumption?
So the plasmoids, recover the waste energy, probably around about, out of that 66%, they're probably capturing around about an extra 20 to 30% of the energy and reintroducing it to the motor. So you've got that feedback loop between the plasmoids putting more energy into the system and then more energy coming out for them to harvest. So the feedback loop is set to that rate, and so the fuel economy will be, you go 30% further on the same amount of fuel. By simply recovering, it's a waste energy recovery system, and they sort of say, oh, it's, like free energy. No, you've already paid for it. I'm just recovering what you've paid for, and a small part of it. Now, when this technology is advanced, it'll go on to the next stage, is that we use oil to create protein, because the plasmoids can turn oil into protein. And so protein's worth more than petrol, 10 times more. So basically, but that'll balance out to 2 or 3 times more supply and demand. So for the oil industry, it can swap over easily because we go to use protein, which the world needs, and to fertilize the oceans with protein and fertilize the oceans with iron, which is the next thing to do to get the carbon credits and do it in a mature way. So we have the answer to that as well. So the oil industry is a win-win for everyone. They make more money, we get, we should be able to get double the efficiency out of over time with the perfection of the technology. But then by then, the oil industry is selling the protein and fertilizing the ocean and getting the carbon credits for it. And so it's a whole new system that I'm trying to bring in. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's pretty impressive. I hope our viewers as well are enjoying the discussion as we do.
And once everyone understands plasma and plasmoids in a commercial sense, and we solve a big problem with the CO2, because you can turn carbon to oxygen, and Robert Haralick's writing that paper, and the 1934 paper, as I said, with Oliphant and Rutherford, and the 1939 paper with on imploding bubbles with Oppenheimer and Schneider, and the 1957 paper with Winston Bostic. And then Ken Shoulders, he had done his lifetime's work. He'd proven the production and use of plasmoids. My direct matter to energy drive is directly from his notes and in his PowerPoint, where he fired into a copper sheet, and what came out was traveling at 450,000 miles an hour.
Wow.
Right, and that was the same as Winston Bostic's result. So you can fly in space at 450,000 miles an hour. Right, and you turn the copper into gold while you're doing it. So, and that's heavier. So actually, you've got more inertia as you go along as well, and you've got more potential. So the point is that these designs are in my notes of the direct matter to energy drive, which comes directly off that. No one's disputed the figures. 450,000 miles an hour, 200,000 pounds per square inch. To give you an idea, I think the 36 square inches is about 1,080. So the 36-inch diameter circle is 1,080 square inches. And so the normal, say, the F-35 fighter, the thrust from that turbine is for a 36-inch round 36-inch turbine is around about 40,000 pounds of thrust, and with our technology, it's 200,000 pounds of thrust per square inch.
Wow.
So it's 5,000 times more powerful, right? So there's no contest, yeah. And this is an inconvenient truth. Again, going back to Al, student of the Nile, Kemet. Right, so alchemy and the Library of Alexandria with its, is it 50,000 documents were burned there when the Romans burned that down, and the Carthage, they burnt down the library there as well. So we've lost all these, vestiges of things of knowledge. This is, again, going back to it, this is old knowledge that was used to cut rocks, shift rocks, lift rocks. You can do anything with the plasmoids by your consciousness, and that's what we lost. So I think that the sad thing for me is that, I'm just a boy from Tasmania. And so, I was lucky to have the good mentors, but I never imagined that when you spend your whole life searching for the truth and find it, and then you document it, that then you become the target of, assassination attempts and, evisceration in the press and, all the dark ops and everything. Very disappointing. But as I say, the hope is that we have interviews like this because humanity doesn't want to be oppressed and doesn't want to be destroyed.
High time for truth to prevail, to save these bits of sanity that we have left in our humanity in order to hopefully survive.
So I'm trying to get my story out there. This is part of the process, because it's a personal story about I just simply wanted to find out the truth for the benefit of humanity.
Mr. Malcolm, were experiments conducted with changing the parameters of the installation, and what possible results did this give?
Good question. Evokes a good answer. Yeah, it's a frequency imprinting device. So it actually dismantles. Here's the big one, and I'll leave the big one till last. Okay, so audience, guess what the 432 spheres represent and why are they 432? Because the radius of the sun is 432. And if you take a 4-inch sphere, a 3-inch sphere, and a 2-inch sphere, then it's 51.84 square inches.
Wow.
So I'm vibrating it at the frequency of time itself. So how do you dismantle matter? Put the same frequency on that created in the first place. So simple. Yeah. So there's your final 51.84. I use that in my sphere. The spheres you don't change, but if you change the distance of the cylinders between it, and you have to have the proper transitions to 51.84, because you can't transmit that energy, if you like, the concept, properly.
Okay. Another question. The video states that the technology is available to everyone. Can, for example, a mechanic independently reproduce and adjust the operation of an engine with a plasmoid generator? What skills and equipment are needed for this?
Well, at the moment, we have units that are pre-produced that are being sold in Thailand through our factory there, which I first did my research in. Yeah, so, and then but I designed it specifically so it could be built in anybody's workshop. I dumbed it down as simple as I could. So, and using things like kitchen scrubbers, right?
Wow.
Just, in the bubbler, and just a UV light that's from a pet shop for a lizard, right? So, and stainless steel is available, and the spheres are available commercially. So yes, all the bits and copper pipes available commercially. So all the bits and pieces for our design are available to any handyman with a sort of a normal handyman workshop with a vise and pipe benders and stuff. So yeah, it's been designed that way, but mass production is where we're going with it. We're actually mass producing machines. We want to try and manufacture the one machine in Ireland, and then send that to India to be reproduced, and then send that machine to all the 200 countries of the world, so everyone in the world can have the machine and can turn any pollution, whether it's from coal burning, any hydrocarbon or any fuel at all, or anything, any heat can turn into usable energy, any source. So it doesn't matter whether it's kerosene, diesel, bunker fuel, it'll clean it up, and burn it more effectively. Effectively with the coal, you're putting the plasmoids back into the bed of the fire. So, and that means you've got plasma in the fire, not just a burn front, a chemical burn front. You've actually got plasma in the base of the fire. From the plasmoids discharging, because they're net negative, through the water, and when they go in, and we have prototypes I've built for chimneys, prototypes for engines, jet engines, like ship engines, jet engines, any internal combustion engine, any jet engine, anything that has excess heat and pressure and vacuum. I create that from firing the plasmoids. I have a plasmoid gun, which Winston Bostic first built in 1957. Ken Shoulders then made his crime against humanity. His water car had a plasmoid gun, right? And of course, the exhaust in his thing and the exhaust in my thing, you can see the artifacts there are diamond tubules of a polymer, which is a polymer of plasmoids linked to carbon and oxygen and nitrogen.
Wow.
It's a polymer. You can put an electron beam on it and it blows up like a balloon. So the next generation of knowledge, the next generation of thing, and the thing is that the very things that people have been humiliated about and burned at the cross, like for years, and burn the witch. Anyone that had this information was actually targeted. So you've got to say that there's an entity or a group that existed for thousands of years that has been actively seeking anyone that had this information to destroy them and discredit them and get rid of it. And Martin Fleischmann was one, and that was a great example, recent one, that he was poisoned, and I said I met with him for 10 days, and he was on 60 Minutes. It was a wasted opportunity for humanity. We could have gone on that path, and that was like 30 odd years years ago. But that paper, Oliphant and Rutherford, it was 1934. I mean, that's 90 years ago. So we lost, for what? So anyway, say this is, we do have the internet now. We do have this platform. I mean, every time I go on for a conference, my phones have been reported stolen, my bank accounts shut down, my internet, my website shut down. That's all the time that happens. So every time I go to a conference, or when I was the last time they shut it down wasn't even a conference. It was the fact that we were putting together our board and restructuring the company, which took us 4 or 5 months. And so in that period while we're doing that, it was still going on. And so this is their mechanisms, to suppress, and so people have to be aware of that. And the open sources help because they would have stopped it by putting a above top secret. That's why I was on an island, Maldives, where I could be outside of the jurisdiction. And so I could publish all my notes. It's safe technology, and it's available. You've known it's available for thousands of years. You've suppressed it. Time to stop, time to let it get out, and time to let everyone benefit from clean energy.
So if the technology is publicly available, where can we find detailed drawings and diagrams for its reproduction?
Well, I said the strikefoundation.earth, and also I'd recommend Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project, Bulgaria, for the artifacts that are also the ball lightning crashing into our inside our exhaust pipe, which is, by the way, 55,000 lightning strikes per second is what it goes to, right? 55,000 a second. Each one of them, with the big 24-inch sphere, it has to go 3-inch gap. So it's more than 60,000 volts. So 60,000 times 55,000, do the math.
Oh my God.
You asked how much energy was in there, do the math. It's just phone numbers. It doesn't mean anything because you can't comprehend it. But
As much as you need.
as much as you
Any
need.
number. Pick a number.
Pick a number. It doesn't matter. Yeah, so that's the real reality of it, yeah.
So please demonstrate for our viewers, using several random examples, how to use your table of resonant frequencies. For example, how to determine the resonant frequencies for aluminium, copper, and their compounds.
Okay, well, going to my notes, there's I've got I've laid out the mathematical way to treat to look at the melting points of any. You get it from the melting point. The key was this. This is the big thing. It's an obvious thing. I've been talking to you about it, but I'll make it more obvious, right? So the key was that if hydrogen is the alpha ladder, if that's the basis, it's like Cuisenaire blocks, or like Lego blocks. If hydrogen is one Lego block and you just put 2 and suddenly you got helium, you put 3 Lego blocks, you now got so hydrogen and helium. So the idea that goes up to 25, so it doesn't go up into any radioactive or anything dangerous for nuclear weapons or anything like that.
If you could demonstrate for our viewers several random examples.
If hydrogen is the base, and it's just a matter of adding to it, like and you make helium. So you make 3 heliums as carbon and 4 heliums oxygen. It's very simple. So the whole thing is simple. So you can actually, and if you turn to plasma, you can apply a frequency because you know the frequency. Why is that the frequency? Well, what is the sun's frequency? Well, it has 11.11, which is its only frequency, is 11.11 years. It flips its poles. That's its pulse. 11.11 years is its pulse. Right, so
Wow.
the heart of the sun, right? So now you take the 432, you take the 111. Well, 111 times 24 hours is what? It's your 266. What's 266? It's the density, because it's specific gravity against water. Water freezing, go back from freezing point 0 to minus 2.592 is hydrogen, protium, right? Now, this is all the links. So you go from the freezing points, then you go you can take then, you've got the 25,920 years, same number. And you've got the distance, the moon travels in miles, same number. So you get what I mean? Now you've got a melting point. It's the same number as the moon's traveling in an hour, 2,160 times 12 is 2,592. So if that's related to the structure of the whole solar system, right? One rotation is 25,920 years. The angle of Cheops period, 25.92. It's all related. And if that's the case, then you can take that methodology and take the melting point of any element, and I've got it in my book here, and you could calculate from that. And even I've got the example here, carbon and oxygen. You take the melting points, you can calculate the resonant frequency.
Wow.
If it happens for helium and hydrogen, no, if it happens to hydrogen, and that creates the rotation of, the precession of the equinox, 25,000 years, 2,160. If that's true, which it is, then it's very logical. We'll just take the melting point of anything, right? And you multiply the melting point of hydrogen, which I showed in the abstract here, which is here is this one here, which is 2592, 2952, 129,600. And if you look at the octave sequence there, you've got your all of your planetary numbers and all of your speed of light, so, and the diameter of the sun. So the thing is that it's all, I said it's all related. So therefore, in answer to that question, it's quite simple that, and it's in my notes, that you can, from it, that you can calculate from the melting point of any element its resonant frequency.
Wow.
And it's simple. There's no big long formulas. It's just what's the melting point? Because it's a phase change when it heads in. Mm-hmm. When water boils, you hear it going boiling. Before it boils, right, it goes quiet.
Ah, okay.
Just goes silent. Why? Before that, it's vibrating and moving. It suddenly goes silent because for that volume of water, it's reached the point where all the energy goes to the centre. It's reached its resonant point, so it finds its own centre.
And then
it's silent. It's the eye of the storm. And what happens? Then the storm bubble.
Wow.
See what I mean?
That is pretty impressive.
Yeah, so you change, even though you change the volume of the water, you're always going to have that silent spot where everything goes still. Because
that's true, actually.
the 0 point's forming because it's reached its resonant frequency. So it bounces into the centre, yeah? So, and like 2,160 again, times 400 is your 864, yeah? And you take all these numbers in my notes, is that the resonant frequency of all things, like a cube is 2,160 degrees. Well, what if you match the 2,160 degrees, internal angles of cube, and you match that up exactly to its resonance? That is, you make exactly the right volume of, like a bell. A bell, the Tibetan bell, is just a square, and they keep shaving off the metal until you reach actually the tune, the note that you want to get. Mm-hmm. Because it's the volume of the material that creates. And then what they do when they make the church bells, they measure out very carefully a volume on a cube and then melt it and make the bell. Right? And when Tesla was making his coils, newsflash, he used to get a block of copper, 2 blocks of copper, exactly the same weight and volume, the same material, and then he'd make, out of one, he'd make the fine wire, and out of another, he'd make the coarse wire, so that the coils would be frequency matched through volume, area, volume, time. And that's what we lost, because energy is actually, it's nothing to do with what we were taught. It's the change in the space something fills, is the change in energy. Nothing to do with what we're taught. It's the change, if you change the amount of area that the energy's in, that's the key to the universe. And all resonance is made out of these blocks, the Tibetan blocks and the Tibetan bells, so you could file off exactly the right amount of material. But Tesla took it one thing further and said, okay, we've got the blocks, we filed them off, but we use those to make the 2 coils. So they're exactly frequency matched because they have exactly the same amount of material in it, of the same composition.
This is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Malcolm, what shortcomings of this technology would you point out that still need to be addressed and the model improved?
Well, I mean, it's all to do with resonant frequency. So we're working on the transitions and we're working on the materials. And, we just used 304 stainless at the time being. And we've got an annealing sequence for that where we make sure that all of the crystal form is square. So it's lattice confined fusion, which is cold fusion. But the point is that it's all about force multiplication. If you hit someone with your fist, that's at 20 times the area of your fingertip is like about 20 or 30 times less, depending on your thing, less than your fist. So your pounds per square inch, just by pushing all your force onto one point, is a force multiplier. You know what I mean? It's a concept, because you're changing the area under which that force has been applied. It's the same as the frequency, the area under which it's applied. You know what I mean? Energy, force, area, translation. Yeah, so that's the thing of it.
Okay, in what other areas besides internal combustion engines can your technology be applied?
Anything and everything, like direct matter energy drive, jet engines, ship engines, submarines, aircraft carriers, spaceships, everything, because it's a fundamental force of nature that we're rediscovering. And the simplest application was clean up the air. And that can also clean up the air of Mars too, terraforming, which is something you probably mentioned before. So, yeah, anything and everything.
Perfect.
One-stop shop for everything. It's a complete one plasmoid revolution, industrial revolution, yeah.
Okay, the idea of cleaning the ocean by converting hydrocarbons into protein was voiced. How does your technology make it possible to implement this in practice?
It was quite simply because you just use the plasmoids to transmute the oil to protein. You have the thing, but you can put the archaea, which are the symbiotic organisms that have the plasmoids in them, which the shrimp in the flamingo sheet lakes, and so the ephemeral lakes. You have the shrimp, and you have the algae, half animal, in there transmuting elements to create energy, right? And then you have you go into that's the direct, basically just transmuting. You're taking the sunlight that would normally kill things, but if you have infused the shrimp have infused themselves with plasmoids. So therefore, what happens when they infuse themselves with the plasmoids absorb the energy of the sun, so they don't cook. And they can sit on a 1,000-degree black smoker at the bottom of the ocean and not be burnt. Yet, if you put them in boiling water, they'll be cooked. So there's a whole, extremophiles is the name of these things. There's a whole branch there. Oppenheimer had a fish tank and 2 floating rings, right, the plastic rings floating. He poured crude oil into both of them, and the fish would swing around the tank. And he put the archaea, inoculant, with the plasmoids into the oil. And after 5 minutes, it started dropping down because it was heavier, because it had reconstituted where the crude oil was like about 0.8 of a weight, and then it became heavier than water, so it went over 1 and sunk. Right, so then you had the fact that the fish on television were eating the oil. If you take the energy out of our society, the whole society dies. The same principle, if you do the opposite, if you're actually introducing energy into any ecosystem, it's going to thrive. Take the energy out, dies. That's why solar minimums are so, you mentioned like climate change, all the rest of the stuff they're using. Well, we're going into an ice age, not into warming. Because, and you can see it, it's on the graphs. Randall Carlson did a really good job of the ice cores in Greenland showing this trend.
A couple of more. Can plasma technologies be used to provide energy for atmospheric water generators or to clean the atmosphere and ocean from micro and nanoplastics?
Yeah, it can get rid of everything because they go after anything that's got a lot of energy in it. So plastics have a lot of energy in it. So to break down the plastics, there's a lot of food.
Perfect.
So that's part of the whole thing about having the plasmoids in there, because they have the capability of attacking and dismembering hydrocarbons. which is, in any high energy thing that we view as toxic because they get more energy eating it first, and they eat the lower energy things later.
What obstacles do you encounter on the way to mass production of such generators?
Well, we're going into mass production now. We started in Thailand where I first did my test work. That's, I think it was 1,000 units for sale now. We're now gearing up to produce, as I said, these mass production units that are going to go in the 200 countries of the world. So that's where we're at, and we're going to be in mass production. We'll send those units to 200 countries in the world, and those will be then they'll mass produce in every country of the world.
So here we are with Malcolm Bendall at the factory.
Yeah, and we just zeroed out the cane gas analyzer. So you can see it's 21.56% oxygen, and so you've got CO2 is at 0, carbon monoxide 0, and hydrocarbon 0. So it's just it's now slowly normalizing there. So this gives us our baseline. Yeah, we're here with our machine. This is our ultimate. We call it the super stubby. And initially this was 24 inches, but the ultimate is 2 inches because it's got a 3-inch sphere inside it. So basically it means this is inside here is a 3-inch sphere, a 3-inch pipe connecting, and so we have 3, 3, 3. Yep, so that's the best combination. We've had this up to 24 inches, but we kept on taking it down and adjusting. The pipe adjusts the heat, and we had to expand the pipe from its tiny differences makes a lot of difference. So we went from 1 inch outside diameter to 1 inch inside diameter, and that was enough to cool it down because we had a longer pipe to keep it cool, but just by a tiny little bit opening there, and instead of having 1 inch outside diameter, half inch, sorry, we have half inch inside diameter, and that made all the difference. It made the cooled the system down, and this is what you control the heat and the action of the Thunderstorm generator, what it produces. So this is the best for the reduction of carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and hydrocarbons. Carbon is 3 heliums. You add 1 more helium, 4 heliums is oxygen. So we're simply pulling the carbon apart and putting it back together again, and it's as simple as that. It's too simple. That's why no one can understand it. Right, so the question is, what size spheres? Well, the spheres, like for example on this motor, would go up to a range from around about 300 cc's to about 450 cc's for the that's 4, 3, 2, 4 inch, 3 inch, 2 inch. That ratio is important because the ratio is the same as the radius of the sun, which determines it's the volume of time, 51.84 square inches, which means this resonates at the frequency of time itself, so that time pulls apart. The sun is a time frequency imprinting device, and so the moon's a timekeeper. So basically, by applying this frequency to the carbon, it makes it fall apart. And as I said, take the 3 heliums that makes up carbon and add 1 more helium, and you've got oxygen. We'll take you through the generation of the plasmoids happens in this water here. This is called the bubbler. The plasmoids are born there from imploding microbubbles, and then they come through, they get charged inside this chamber here, and basically the water literally explodes and puts a big pressure back on the bubbler. So those bubbles that have expanded, then when through the vacuum, it's pulled through, comes in here and literally explodes, so that the pressure goes back the other way and collapses the bubble. And that collapse is if you look at Oppenheimer and Schneider paper in 1939, the power of that collapse is the same pressures and temperatures of the sun. So it's fusion. Yep. So and then they get charged between this and this sphere. They get charged. There's a 0 point here because there's a North Pole, South Pole, and equatorial plane, or the event horizon is here. So basically, the carbon comes out here, reaches the event horizon where there is no frequency, falls apart, and then is reconstituted here as oxygen, and the oxygen comes out here. So at atmospheric pressures and temperatures, so the carbon has been reconstructed to oxygen, so there is no pollution. Because without carbon, you can't have any carbon particles coming out, so that's clean. You don't have any hydrocarbons. You don't have, and that free hydrogen in this chamber here gets fused and makes helium. 3 heliums is a carbon. 4 heliums is oxygen. So it's a very simple process. And actually, I'm publishing a book, or Roland Perry's publishing a book with me in it, on Oppenheimer and Rutherford's 1934 paper, which demonstrated that you could take 2 hydrogens and make a helium, and 3 heliums carbon, 4 heliums oxygen. It's called the alpha ladder in science. Right? So very well-known process, but no one ever came up with such a simple way to do a complex thing. So, and then we can run the bubbler so you can see it operate, and we will use this device here to get a sample coming from the engine, and then we'll move this to here so we can get then before and after. The oxygen was up quite high, see that? That was actually quite a good result there. We might have to adjust this one a little bit. Look, oxygen's down to 3%. Now it's, wait a minute, we'll do it again. Perfect, yeah? 12. But now, this one's down. It's the engine itself. The engine is now infused with the plasmoid. So this one's now down. You got the summary there of, we started up here, yeah? And the last one we got, like when we put it back, was 12%. So, but you'll notice the thing is that the carbon monoxide here was 9.5%. And from the same point, after it's been running for a while, the plasmoids have actually gone into the engine, and the engine itself and the piston now has the magic in it. The plasmoids are actually inside the engine, and it's made a huge difference. And it's good we left it here because it gave it time to discharge. So now it's charged again. It takes about 10 minutes for that to charge, to get up to charge, and then the water gets lighter, and it actually works better when it's got a bit lighter, because it gets all the micro bubbles in it. So, and the micro bubbles about 10 minutes, and then they come in, and then they get charged here. They go into the engine here, but the engine itself, the piston, is also steel. So the steel in the piston actually acts the same as the steel here, right? So what you're doing is you're charging the piston. Now the piston is actually done its work, because now the piston is bringing the carbon monoxide, even without this thunderstorm generator, is bringing the carbon monoxide down to 0.18% here and to 0.19%, down from the original, when we first started it, 9.54%. So that is amazing. And it means that what it proves is the engine itself, because this point is just the exhaust coming before it's gone into the sphere, right? So basically what it's saying is that we're actually charging up the engine with plasmoids, and the plasmoids get in the metal matrix where they charge and then discharge into create plasma and discharge into the combustion chamber. So now what you've really got is that even without the technology on now, once that's charged, the combustion chamber, it's getting rid of the carbon monoxide, which is the most toxic part of the gas. So this is a great result for humanity. And we're going to put this on the chimney. If you turn around and just look at the chimney there, we're going to put this same technology inside that chimney. Because all you've got here is a tube within a tube. And if we put a tube inside that tube, and you have the vacuum that pulls the vacuum to put into the base of the coal, you're actually taking the plasmoids and putting the plasma into your coal, which means you're going to get and with the oxygen, you're going to get a higher burn, right? Because you've got the same oxygen coming out of the chimney, but now you've got oxygen and plasmoids, which means the plasma will burn at higher temperatures of coal. You'll probably get a 30 to 50% increase in thermal efficiency of the coal. And because you're re-injecting the waste heat from your chimney, that means that you're going to have, that's where the energy is coming from, because coal, unfortunately, in burning is, like usually average about 28% efficiency. So, that really means it's close to 3/4 of heat going up the chimney, which is wasted. And if we can get back just, a quarter of that, it's just about as much energy as the coal itself. So that means you're returning that heat energy back into the system and getting rid of all the innoxious components at the same time. So I think that really is a fantastic take. I think we can get that up to a 50% efficiency for the coal. And that means that effectively you're almost doubling or halving the amount of coal you have to use to get the same heat output. So, which will be really good.